My name is Chan. I graduated from NUS from the architecture department in 2021. And right now, currently, I'm practicing as a visual and spatial designer / artist, mainly working in photographic mediums and also in exhibition design. My artwork project is an ongoing series titled Sorry for the Inconvenience. So it's a project that is ruminating the interconnectedness of the world through this idea of construction of architecture. So what I do is I juxtapose, I layer photographs of construction landscapes together with other landscapes such as cities and natural environments to produce this idea of connection.
As a practicing photographer, researcher and designer, how does your work inspire the series?
Yeah, so maybe I would point to the period of time where I was graduating, so 2021, and there were a lot of conversation about construction, about architecture being a not very sustainable act for the environment. Basically, construction takes up a lot of carbon and is plays a huge part in causing global warming today, right? So there's a lot of conversation about how can we make architecture more sustainable. So one very prominent book that I remember reading is called Unless by Kyo Mo. And he describes how, in the construction of a single building itself, your material, such as your concrete, is coming from one place, from another end of the world, to, for example, Singapore. And your labor, for example, in Singapore, we have our Bangladeshi and Chinese workers flying in from their home countries to Singapore. So construction of architecture itself is like a global event whereby there's a lot of transnational movement basically from one place to another. And once a piece of architecture is built, actually you can see in a way that there's a little bit of something from all over the world coming together like a collage, right? But we don't necessarily perceive it that way. So that book kind of opened up that way of seeing architecture for me, which is very interesting and definitely a huge inspiration for this work that's behind me. Yeah, so I was not necessarily trying to address them as problems, but I was thinking of how do I show other people this new worldview that I gained. So being very engaged in photography for a very long time and practicing in it, naturally I was drawn to using photography as a medium to try to experiment visually. How do I project, this interpretation of architecture, of landscapes, of the world? Yeah. And I think very initially when I was doing this idea of juxtaposing pictures of construction onto pictures of landscapes, I was having this quite a one-sided view on construction and architecture itself. Because, in my point of view back then, I was thinking about how construction is inconveniencing the landscape. So harkening back to the title, right? Sorry for the inconvenience. It's like a piece of construction is inconveniencing the landscape. But actually that thought has sort of morphed and transformed as I began the second part of this open call, which was installing the photographs in the space, right? So I think during that process, something changed. The way I viewed my work kind of flipped. I didn't feel like the construction was merely influencing the landscape or inconveniencing the landscape. It could also be seen the other way around, right? Like the landscape is also inconveniencing the construction itself, producing that idea of connectedness, right? It's not just like one-sided relationship. And an interesting kind of I would say it's like a mishap that led to that thought is when I was installing the artwork. I installed the work flat onto the wall, but because that wall is not insulated well, it was exposed to external heat quite a lot. What happened was the prints, they started to bubble up, they started to ripple because of material differences, right? And then I felt at that moment, I was inconvenienced because now I had to resolve something, right? But at the moment, I thought also, because of this experience of inconvenience, I was connected then to this wall that was heated. I was then connected to the laborers that was doing this wall or the designers that didn't decide not to put proper insulation on this wall, and I was connected to the sun, which like, I don't even know what's the distance, but like millions of miles away. Just because of this like little inconvenience, I could feel all these tethers. So I think that's the interesting moment for me, where everything started to, that shifted my point of view, basically, of this project. Then now to the installation of the project and me dealing with this mishap, I was trying not to view my work as like a sacred thing. You know, I was trying to see that it can inconvenience me, but I can also kind of do something back to it to resolve it. I didn't have to see it as something that, oh, it's ruined now, I have to redo it in the way exactly I wanted it to be. Right? So I treated it as another blank canvas for me to work on it again. I resolved it in a way that it became a collaborative part of the work, right? Like this deformation of the prints, they became a feature of the work itself rather than me trying to hide it, like trying to erase it. Maybe if there's one thing I like to kind of tell an audience, right, that is not so equipped with digital manipulation or photography itself, is that just be critical of all the images you see, right? I mean, clearly you can see in my photographs there are juxtapositions because I left the frame. That is all like a very conscious decision, because that's like what I'm trying to communicate, right? That these are two different photographs put together telling you a story. But in reality, people are making seamless. I do it all the time in my commercial work. I'm cloning something, I'm removing something, I'm adding something that you don't know of. So if you are not critical of that, and if you are taking that as the truth, that is also like a dangerous thing, you know, because photographs are so easy to manipulate anyway. But they are still works of art, and they are transformative experience, right? They transform whatever we're taking, for whatever subject that we're taking, and presenting in another way to an audience. So that itself is the beauty of photography, right? There's that sense of transformation. Yeah, and that is what people should take away when they're looking at photographs, is that I'm looking at a transformed subject. I'm not looking at the subject that I'm taking a photograph. It's not so innocent.